hang on to your hats and let's get started. Hey friends, I have got a question for you. Do you know what your siblings look like? I mean, I do.
Good for you.
And now here's another question for you. Do your siblings look pretty similar now to how they looked 20 years ago? And this question is obviously for adults. But mine do, which is why it always bothered me that Joseph's brothers didn't recognize him after a 22-year lapse in time.
It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, he would have looked different, but the fact that they didn't suspect it at all, that just seemed strange to me. So I did some digging, and what I found out will shock you. It probably won't. It won't, but it might surprise you a little bit. So hang on to your hats and let's get started. Now, this video is part of my Things That Make You Go Ew series, but it's not gross at all. It's more of a thing that makes you go, So feel free to have your kids watch this one. Our topic today is totally G-rated.
Everyone, come.
Now for the backstory. Joseph was just 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery, which is totally awful, but since they had initially planned to kill him, this was actually an improvement, and Joseph was probably really grateful.
Silver lining.
So fast forward 22 years and a now 39-year-old Joseph is staring his brothers in the face as they ask him for food so their families won't starve. And Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they have no idea who he is. No idea. Why is that? Why?
It makes no sense.
Well, I think it's actually pretty simple. Even though Joseph's appearance was much different, he was probably dressed like an Egyptian and he was much older, it might have simply been a matter of Joseph not being where his brothers expected him to be. But before we dive into Joseph's story, I want to preface with a story of my own. So a few years ago, I had an appointment with a new dentist and he seemed vaguely familiar. And as he checked my teeth, I just had this feeling like I knew him, but I just didn't give it much thought. And then one day, with the help of a friend, I made the connection.
Then what happened?
My dentist and I had dated at BYU. Not just one date, but many dates. Except now he was in Colorado and not at BYU Provo, and he was my dentist and not a poor college student. And so even though he looked the same, he was somewhere I never expected him to be, and so I didn't recognize him at all, even though I totally remembered him. And I think that may have been what happened to Joseph's brothers. And I find this so fascinating because, I mean, maybe I'm just the village idiot here, but I always assumed that Joseph's brothers knew they were sending Joseph to Egypt. But what I found out is totally different. You see, Joseph and his brothers grew up in Hebron, which is in northern Israel, right around here. And I'm trying to pretend like I know where this map is going to be and not look like an idiot because I'm pointing at the wrong spot. But here, I think, is Hebron. So they were in Hebron when they sold their brother, and the group they sold their brother to was some traveling Midianites. And the Midianites, when they weren't traveling, they tended to settle in the Arabian area east of the Gulf of Aqaba here. So that is where Joseph's brothers would assume he was going to be taken, is somewhere here in Arabia, right? But instead, those silly Midianites, they took Joseph into the Egyptian capital Avaris, which is modern day Tel El Daba, which is right here. And that is about 280 miles west of where their brothers expected him to be taken. That is a full day or two of walking away. So when Joseph's brothers, they got to Egypt, they weren't even thinking about Joseph. They didn't know they had sold him into slavery in Egypt. In their minds, he was somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula working as a slave. So Joseph living in Egypt, much less ruling Egypt, would never have crossed their minds.
Kiddo, that makes a lot of sense.
And that, my friend, is what I think is probably the main reason that Joseph's brothers didn't recognize him. Yes, he looked different, but he was also hundreds of miles from where they expected him to be. And that hopefully took this moment in the scriptures from things that make you go, to an aha moment. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you later. You are awesome.